What's up everybody, this is Age of Empires Tips and I'm back with yet another tutorial video for you, and this time it is on straggler trees. Straggler trees are these lonely trees that are sitting all on their own without any company, and they are very sad. That's why if you're doing a berry start, you should really put them out of their misery and use these trees in order to collect wood for your first storage pit. And these trees are actually distributed pretty evenly across the map, so there will always be a few around your town center. So with, for instance, a regular berry start, you will make a granary, put some villagers on food, and then the next few villagers will start collecting wood from these straggler trees in order to make your first storage pit of, next to some real forest. Now, straggler trees actually come in two different flavors. The first one yields 75 wood, as can be seen here. And the second one yields only 40 wood. When collecting wood from straggler trees, there are two major points to consider in order to maximize your efficiency and to get your first storage pit up and running as quickly as possible. Because that's really the goal here if you're doing a berry start. You want to get your first storage pit up as quickly as possible, because getting wood from a forest obviously is much more efficient than collecting wood from stragglers, because they're much farther away and your villagers have to spend more time walking back and forth from your town center. So it's very important to maximize your efficiency when doing collecting wood from straggler trees. And these two rules are very simple. They can be applied by any player, whether you are a beginner or a more advanced player, even though if you are a more advanced player, you should already know these. But they don't require any sophisticated micromanagement or whatsoever. Now, the first point to consider when collecting wood from straggler trees is distance. You should always prefer trees that are closer to your town center. And this is quite obvious, of course, because the closer the tree is to your town center, the less your villagers have to walk, and the sooner you will be able to stockpile enough wood for your first storage pit. The second point is that you should prefer 75 wood trees over 40 wood trees. And this may be a little bit less obvious, but before a villager can start to collect wood from a tree, he first needs to chop it down. And consider this: if you're collecting wood from only 40 wood trees, then you need to spend a bigger amount of your time actually chopping down the tree when compared to getting wood from only 75 wood trees, just to get the same amount of wood. Now, some of you might be wondering at this point, what is the trade-off between these two? Should I prefer trees that are closer to my town center, or should I go for trees that yield 75 wood before distance? And I actually took the time to work out the details of this trade-off in theory. Spoilers alert, there is some mathematics ahead.
Boom! 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1, that's 3, quick maths.
So yeah, it's time for some
quick maths.
And if you don't find this very interesting, you can skip ahead to the final answer. So I've made two equations that represent the time it takes to collect all the wood from a certain tree, whether it's a 75 wood tree or a 40 wood tree. Now, for a 75 wood tree with a given distance from the town center D, the equation is as follows. It's 16 times the time that it takes for a villager to walk from the town center to the tree, and time here is represented by the distance of the town center from the tree divided by the velocity of the villager v. Now, to that we add the time that it takes to actually chop down the tree, and then of course we need to collect 70 wood, which is 7 times the time that it takes to collect 10 wood, and then we have the final 5 wood, which takes the collection time for 10 wood divided by 2, and then the equation for the 40 wood tree looks very similar, except that we only walk back and forth 8 times and we only have to collect 40 wood. Now, in order to get an answer to our trade-off question between distance and yield, let's consider the following hypothetical situation. Let's say we want to collect exactly 75 wood and we want to know how much further the 75 wood tree has to be from the town center in order for it to be more efficient to collect 75 wood from 2 40 wood trees. Now, this corresponds to the following inequality, where x stands for the distance of the town center to the tree. And of course, this is a variable, as we want to know how large x has to be in order for it to take more time to get 75 wood from a 75 wood tree, as opposed to two 40 wood trees. Now, the time it takes to collect 75 wood from two 40 wood trees is 2 times the time that it takes to collect wood from two 40 wood trees minus the collection time of 5 wood, which is equal to the collection time of 10 wood divided by 2. This is because two 40 wood trees yield 80 wood in total and we only want 75 wood. Now, the distance d of the town center to the 40 wood tree is constant and the same for both trees, which means that both trees have to be in the exact same location, which is of course not possible in a real game, but let's consider it for this moment. Now let's substitute the equations into this inequality and we will obtain this very large formula. Now doing this you can quickly realize that the collection rate doesn't actually matter here, since the collection time to collect 75 wood is the same regardless of what type of tree you're getting it from. So we can cancel out all the terms that involve a t-collect and then we're left with this. If we now rearrange some terms, we can get x on one side and all the rest on the other side of the inequality. And now we can simply plug in the numbers for t cut and the villager velocity v, and the time to chop down a tree actually amounts to 9 seconds, while the velocity of a villager is equal to 1.1 tiles per second. And finally, computing all this, it turns out that the 75 wood tree only has to be 0.61 tiles further away than the 40 wood trees in order for it to be more effective to take wood from the 40 wood trees. Now, I know that was quite a bit of
quick maths.
But what you should take away from this is that the 75 wood tree only has to be 1 tile further away for it to be less effective to actually collect wood from 40 wood trees. Of course, this is all theoretical. Obviously, trees aren't going to be in exactly the same spot. They will be in different spot. But it puts things into perspective, and you should really focus on distance from the tree to the town center first, and then only care about the yield of the tree. So if two trees are equally far away from the town center, then yeah, by all means, go for the 75 wood tree. Now, of course, this also makes intuitive sense because let's say it takes 1 second longer to walk to a 75 wood tree. That, of course, is magnified because you need to walk back and forth 8 times. So it actually takes you 16 times longer to walk to that tree, which is obviously much longer than it would take than to simply chop down another tree, which only takes 9 seconds. Now, of course, it's not this strict in reality because distances are somewhat hard to judge sometimes, and obviously there are more advantages to a 75 wood tree. For instance, a 75 wood tree requires less micromanagement because they will be able to collect wood from the same tree for an extended amount of time, but still, it's something you should consider. Now, of course, distance and yield are not the only two factors that determine how efficient and fast you will be when collecting wood from straggler trees. Other things that are important are, for instance, how efficient you distribute your villagers. For instance, you don't really want to have all your villagers cut from one tree at the same time. You need to spread them out a bit. So if you have 6 villagers, try to have 2 villagers on one tree, so you're cutting 3 trees at the same time. Now, there's one final point I'd like to address when collecting wood from straggler trees in order to maximize your efficiency, and this point requires a bit more micromanagement, so this applies more to more advanced players, but beginner players should definitely keep this in the back of their head so that they can practice it when they have the opportunity to do so. And this final point is that you need to watch how much wood your villagers are bringing back to your town center. Now, this doesn't really matter if the tree is really close, but this becomes more and more important if trees are farther away from your town center. And this is often the case, for instance, if you have 3 villagers cutting down a 40 wood tree, then 3 villagers will bring back 30 wood to your town center, and then for the last run there's only 10 wood left, so you will have 3 villagers that will all carry back a fraction of that final 10 wood to your town center. However, this is of course very inefficient. So what you want to do in a situation like this is you want to watch for villagers that might carry less than 10 wood back to your town center. And really what you want to do, as soon as the tree has gone down to 0 wood, you want to send them to another tree in order to collect that final bit of wood in order for them to carry 10 wood back to your town center. This is very important, especially for trees that are further away. And this also applies, for instance, to a 75 wood trees, where even if you have only one villager collecting wood from the 75 wood tree, the final walk back the villager will only carry 5 wood. So you really want to keep an eye out on this and make sure that you have them collect the final 5 wood from another tree in order to make sure that they carry 10 wood back to your town center. So as we've seen in this video, collecting wood from straggler trees seems very simple at the surface, but if you dig a little bit deeper, you will see that there are all sorts of little technical details that will determine how efficient you are when collecting wood from straggler trees and how fast you will be able to put down your first storage pit. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you found it useful, make sure to like it and subscribe if you want to stay updated on future videos. Also leave a comment if you have any suggestions or comments concerning the video, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.